Emely Virta is an accomplished professional with over 11 years of experience running, managing, and curating programming within co-working businesses in Miami. Her comprehensive experience encompasses all aspects of operations, sales, and program curation, resulting in exceptional growth, member retention, and community engagement. Having demonstrated a flair for connection, Emely has consistently nurtured a strong sense of community by strategically playing connect the dots with and cultivating fruitful relationships across a plethora of creative industries. Her ability to build strong ties with diverse sectors has not only expanded networking opportunities for co-working members, but has also contributed to the overall success and profitability of her ventures. Equipped with a deep understanding of the importance of community engagement, Emely has successfully created a sense of belonging and camaraderie within the co-working spaces she has managed. She has curated dynamic and engaging programs that have enriched the co-working experience for members and businesses. Through strategic events, workshops, and networking initiatives, she has fostered an inclusive and vibrant ecosystem where collaboration thrives. A true advocate for the power of community, Emely continues to elevate the co-working experience by facilitating connections, promoting collaboration, and driving innovation within the industry. Her proven track record for sales growth, member retention, and community engagement is a testament to her unwavering dedication to excellence within the co-working industry. Amazing. That's you. That's a badass intro. I love it.
Oh, man.
I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome,
Thank
Emely.
you for having me.
I'm so happy. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself in the form of a bio to get us started. And welcome to the CultureRoad Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Really
Honestly,
excited.
Truly.
So it's so good. I know we've been trying to coordinate dates for a while, and I'm so happy that it worked out and that we're here together in Miami. And you and I have only recently met, but just seems like there's so many really interesting topics and threads and experiences to talk about. So I'm so excited to be able to have some of that space here with you today.
I think the one person we need to also thank is Zaid. That's
Yes.
our common person. And again, to that whole connecting the dots, like I think he's very much on that wavelength of like, community, let's go. You guys need to be talking, get in front of each other. Yeah.
So Zaid Portillo was a guest on a previous podcast. If you didn't see Zaid's podcast episode, please watch it. It was amazing, talking about super cool ideas about creativity and AI and technology and leadership. So big shout out to Zaid. All right, my friend, let's talk about you. So one of the things that, we focus on here at the CultureRoad Podcast is the idea that we are in the midst of a pretty significant cultural transformation. I think that's the definition of transformation, right? It's something
Absolutely.
that is kind of a radical change from the status quo. The whole world is going through a very substantial change in many different ways. And so with thinking about transformation, it's always helpful to think about not just where we're going and the path to get there together, hopefully, but also where we've been and where we come from and how we've gotten to this point. So with that framing, I'd like to invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you coming from, and how did you get to be the person we now know as Emely?
Well, born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I would say the road to where I am now was definitely a long one, in that I would say, and I think that definitely applies for a lot of folks, where, you tend to want to stand still where you're the most comfortable. So again, having that sense of community, you have your family, your friends, and everything that you know to be true within probably like a 50-mile radius. But from the time that I was a child, I've had this thing, and I don't know if it's because I'm Sagittarius, maybe, with like 5 other placements on Sagittarius, but I've always had this wild sense of adventure. And so the moment that I was able to like do something on my own, like it was going to happen at light speeds. Like I was already thinking of like the places I will go outside of even the US. So for me, it was, I definitely showed a very strong interest in wanting to venture out. And so that kind of took a life of its own when I decided to go to Ireland for a stint, fell in love, then broke up with a guy, came back. And then I decided, oh, wait, let me go back to school, work on my second degree, and why not do it in Sunshine? So that's how I ended up in Miami. I still have lots of friends and family in Boston, but it's one of those places where it's really comforting to be there for short periods of time. But, it's not, I feel like home is where you make it, right? Where you're that strong sense of community and like where you've kind of grown as an adult, right? And so Miami has become very much that for me.
Love it. Love it. I love this sense of kind of adventure and wanting to go out and explore new things. How did you choose Ireland? Like, how did that become the destination, going directly from Boston to Ireland?
Honestly, it was one of those things. I had just wrapped up my my first degree, and I had, so this is how it went. I had packed up my apartment that I had in Dover, New Hampshire, and I had sent an email from my AOL email. This is back in 2007. And I had sent an email to all my friends. I'm like, hey guys, I've left the door unlocked. The key, once you guys are done grabbing what you want, just hand it over to my landlord. I've already communicated with him. And so what they didn't know is right when I sent that email, I was already like at Logan Airport. I had gone to the checkout counter and I was like, what's the next ticket out of here? And they're like, oh, do you want to go to New York? Do you want to go to Cal? And I'm just like, no, like out of here. I have my passport. Let's go. And so that's how I ended up in Ireland.
Because that was the next place?
Dublin, yeah.
Get out.
One-way ticket. I just left.
Wow.
And again, it was very much rooted in, I think everyone's home life looks very different. I think that's what makes us all so unique, right? But for me, it was always just wanting to see different things, experience different people and foods and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas with my family, they've always been just so deeply rooted in where they're at. And not that there's anything wrong with that by any means, but for me, it was like just always having that, I want more. I want to see stuff, you know what I mean? The world is too big. I'm not a tree. Like I want to go look at stuff, you know? And so that's how I ended up in Dublin.
I love it. That's a great story. It's interesting the way you describe the story, like you started in a place and it wasn't, and you just had a desire to go somewhere else. It wasn't like you were running from something. It wasn't like there was trouble at home. You just had a desire, a yearning to go somewhere else. And then over time, as you got into, at first Ireland and then Miami, that there have been experiences where you kind of acculturate. And there's a really cool model called a U-curve model that perfectly reflects what you were describing. Like we start off in a place and we understand what our culture is. We understand what our place in that spot is. And then we decide to go into a new context, into a new cultural context. It can be a new nation, or it could be a new job. It could be a new relationship. And at first we get there and we're super excited. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my goodness, this is pretty significantly different than where I've been so far. And after a period of time, we acculturate. We kind of get our bearing. We start to understand our way around in that new space. And then we get to a place where we actually feel very comfortable in that new space. And that experience has led us to also being kind of more prepared for the next adventure and even kind of hungry for the next adventure because we know we have it in us. We know that kind of ability to move in and out of culture is something that we are capable of doing. The cool thing, though, about the model is that it also has another piece of it that makes it into a W, like from a U curve going into a new place. Oh my goodness, this is really tricky. I don't know if I should be here or not. I'm going to stick it out. I eventually acculturate and I'm comfortable in the new space. And then the W part is when we go back home. When we get back home and we're like, oh, everybody's still here. And at first it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be back. Yeah. I'm so happy to see my family. It feels good. It feels comfortable. And then you're like, this ain't exactly right for me anymore because we ourselves have changed at that point. But what the culture around us does is try to bring us back in. They're like, girl, stay. You know you're supposed to be here. Come on back. You got your heart, your heart's broke. Just come on back home. And that W curve is like people trying to bring you back to home, wherever home is.
Yeah.
And then, but you then are kind of fundamentally different, right? And so that experience is a really cool one to think about, like as you move in and out of these different cultures, that home will still be there and home will still be doing the thing that it does.
Right.
Like, this is us. This is come on home. Whenever you're ready, we'll be here.
Absolutely.
I love that. So now here you are in Miami, and you are leading an amazing community space. How did you get into the world of communities and building community? Because it sounds like the work that you do is both very in-person and kind of tactile. It's very much involving kind of developing and nurturing relationships. And it also puts you on the cusp, I think, of some of these cultural transformations that are happening as far as people looking for connection. How did you get into this?
I don't think that anyone ever strategically plans to be in co-working. But I would say what led me to it was learning some very hard truths about another industry. I had gotten my second degree in public relations, and like when you have this movie in your head of how you see something working out, right? So the movie in my head was, okay, I'm going to change the world first and foremost. And so I'm going to use my public relations degree to work for a nonprofit organization. And I'm just going to change the game. Like, like I can't just sit here and wait for someone else to do it, And I would say that post, graduation, very quickly, slowly, and then all at once, really, I learned that, and obviously this isn't, I don't like blanket statements. I don't think that all nonprofits operate in this way, but very quickly. And then, I learned that while you may be there for a certain set of reasons, your why, right? That sometimes just may not be the case for everyone involved. And it was a little bit disheartening. It broke my heart a bit, and then a lot. And then I decided I wanted to kind of start from zero doing something else, but also knowing that a lot of what I've learned in school is like applicable on a wide range of things. Yeah. And so I ended up at Miami Shared. It was my first co-working space that I worked at in downtown. And then from there, it's 11 years later, I'm at Ampersand's, and it's, in my opinion, being able to have operated out of a lot of these different spaces where I have arrived feels like, the Super Bowl of sorts, considering, what the space has become for a lot of creative folks in Miami. And now, we're about to open up in Nashville, and it's onwards and upwards. It's, there's no sky, like outer space.
Love it. I love it. Point, dream, aspire. That's right. Yeah. It's so cool because I, of course, have been to Ampersand. I think it's glorious. It's a beautiful space. So it's beautifully designed. It's in a super cool area, part of town. But also you have really cultivated a great sense of like the organizational culture, like how it feels to walk inside, right? To actually walk around and to see the kind of people who are there, and the kind of the way people dress, and the way people are greeted, and just the way people kind of flow through the space has a really positive feel to it. And that can't be unintentional. That must be something that you very intentionally like bring to that physical space. I would say
I'm super sensitive. I'm very sensitive. I'm also very strong, but not to say that one, you need one or the other. For me, it's like they both exist within my existence. And so to that end, this is where I tell you that it's always been very important for me to be comfortable in all the spaces, right? And so when I think of my job, it's very client-facing. So one of the things that I make my absolute business, my number one priority, is every person that walks through that space feels the way that I want to feel all the time, right? So from the scent that you are met with from the moment you walk in the door, to how you're greeted at front of house, to what's playing in the background, which They're all my playlists. I've curated each and every one of them. It's supposed to be like this journey, you know, as you're working through the day and oh, you're going to grab a cup of coffee in the kitchen now. And they're all these just mindful elements within the space that just, you know, people can't help but continue to come back day after day.
I love it. I love and even just, you know, inserting language like the mindfulness, right? That community and connection and a sense of belonging are not things that just happen. They are purposeful acts that are curated by every single one of us. And you obviously have something to do with that, but clearly it's set a tone for the kind of people who you're attracting and how it is that people are behaving in that space together, which is, you know, the definition of culture. So it's pretty beautiful what you've created. I know that the last time I was there, I was tasting like lavender honey with you, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this space. You know, there's just this beautiful kind of element of creativity and very authentic engagement. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about, you have a leadership role, obviously. Tell us a little bit about kind of your leadership philosophy and how it is that you, you know, what you bring to managing the people that you work with there.
I think before I answer that question, I think, you know, there's a big, over time, there has been a little bit of a misunderstanding with what it means to be a manager. And I think that this is very well one of those few little things that humanity has in common in, we all have that one experience or many of a bad manager.
Yes.
And I think it's deeply rooted in a misunderstanding. I think that to be an effective manager, it's about service. Your team. It's not about, oh, well, I'm the boss and I have the manager role and beep, boop, beep. Yeah. No, it's none of that. It's literally, okay, big picture, small picture, the corner of the picture. You have a deep understanding of everything that needs to be done. And you know that there's no I in team, right? And so for me, it's about service. It's about checking in with your team, making sure that they're 100% great. Like we could call front of house right now and ask them, how many times does Emely check in during the day? And it's not even like, are you doing your work? It's literally like, you good? Do you need any help with anything? Have you experienced any kind of setbacks today that, you know what I mean? And to me, it's that. It's about being of service to your team so that we can all operate in a seamless, efficient way, you know?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I agree with you. The definition of manager is often misconstrued. At one point, you talked some about kind of micromanaging. In an article that I read, you talked about the difference between being an effective manager and a micromanager. And there's a great quote. People join great organizations, they leave micromanagers, and it's one of the the number one kind of killers of morale in organizational life. So the kind of way that you're talking about checking in with people, even if it's often, is more about demonstrating care.
100%.
Right?
I think that's one thing that, and I don't, again, I try to be 100% with myself so that I can operate in all these other spaces at my very best. And I think one of the biggest things from my own experiences of having my share of bad managers is you have to care.
Yeah.
That's like, for me, that's like a good starting point is, okay, if you care about yourself, then you're going to be able to care about everyone else in a really healthy way. And so when I say check in, if I know that, I know this friend I know that one of my colleagues recently went through X, Y, and Z. I'm going to check in with them. I'm going to sit down, in their space and be like, hey, how's your spirit?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I can do to like make things a little bit better right now? Do you want some of that rose tea with lavender honey? Like, you let me know.
I will share my rose tea with lavender honey. How do you do that? Because, I work with managers every day and people in leadership roles, and we talk about these concepts, and I develop tools and all of that stuff around these concepts. But still, we're humans, right? We can conceptually get it. We can have theoretical frameworks. We can read the books. We can go to training. But to actually show up as the person you want to be perceived as on an off day is sometimes difficult. How do you do that? Like, when you're not having your very best Emely day, how do you show up as the person you want to be perceived as?
I think that for me, it's always been very deeply rooted in dedicating my life to doing the work, right?
Yeah.
That means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But I think that, one of the main focuses I've had in the last 5 years is doing a whole lot of unlearning. Just because I'm having a bad day doesn't mean that has to become your problem. Doesn't mean that has to impact my manners and how I move within that space. You have nothing to do with it. So for me, when I'm having my days where I feel a little bit off, I'll be sure to communicate with my team. I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit low energy today. If anyone wants to come in or they want to meet with me or whatever, just, let them know that I'd be happy to schedule something, but I'm just going to be in my office for today and get some work done. But pretty much communication.
Yeah. Communication is
oh
good.
My God. Yeah. Who knows? Really? Yeah. It's that.
Yeah.
She's her. Yeah. That's what you got to do.
Well, and it's not only, so it's communicating on those days, but then they also are they have a whole lot of other days of experiencing you where you are showing up as the best version of yourself. Right. So that there's a whole context. So
100%.
that, if 1 out of 10 days or 1 out of 50 days, you're having an off day or a low energy day, they're like, oh, okay, got it. Right. And they know to respect it. And they're not questioning your intentions. They're not questioning whether or not you care. Right. Because there's all this other context. So that kind of proactive investment in a relationship over time. There's interesting, I'm going to mention the research about this, but it's interesting that we actually need a minimum of 3-to-1 ratio as far as those touch points. There needs to be at least 3 times as many opportunities for us to show up as the person positively and affirmatively that we want to be perceived as opposed to the one time where we might not get something perfectly right. I don't mean a whole day, but we may forget something, or we miss a deadline, or come in late for a meeting or something. Those sorts of things can happen once out of 3 times, but those 3 times are what really matters. And optimally, in an organizational culture where relationships are really flourishing, there's a 6-to-1 ratio, where so many more times we are intentionally showing up the way we want to be perceived, so that one time we're a little bit off or we need a little bit of space that's different, people are more than willing to go, yep, no problem. I got you. I know who you are. We're still good.
I would say a big part of that is also leading by example, in that, and again, we've all had that one boss, right, where you were at operating at 100, meeting targets, doing all of the things. And then if you dropped the ball the one time, or if you were delayed on X, Y, and Z that second other time, that becomes and so for me, it's not only do I want to be shown compassion and grace in these moments where maybe I'm not 100% at my usual self, but I also make it a practice to reflect that back. Yes. Whereas, if I have someone on my team that comes in and they're not feeling 100%, I'm going to meet all of that with all the grace in the world and all the compassion in the world. I'm going to make them that rose tea with lavender honey, and I'm going to sit down with them and be like, hey, what's going on? What can I do to kind of lighten the load right now? Because it looks like you have a lot going on and I want to be of service. I mean, that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we create these kind of virtuous cycles, right? So instead of people feeling like you're kind of looking for them to make a mistake, which is actually how our brains sometimes are wired. We have these mental models in our brains that, once we kind of put somebody into a category and we're like, made a mistake. Oh, see, second time. We actually notice those sorts of things more regularly. But if we force ourselves to look for the affirmative or the positive things, then our brain actually kind of reroutes to looking for those things more regularly. And we actually start to cause that, right? Because it's really motivating for people to get caught doing something well. They realize, you know what? I appreciate that you appreciate that. And so now I'm going to do it more often, including modeling generous behavior. Yeah. But it's all about service. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I love it. That's a great philosophy. What do you think about, and I'm going to go back to the concept of doing your own work.
Sure.
Because I read in another article that you were interviewed in, you mentioned having kind of facing and overcoming or working through imposter syndrome. And I have to bring this topic up because, especially in my work, So many conversations that I have on a day-to-day basis involve the phrase imposter syndrome. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about, one, how did you kind of face it? And then two, and what was it kind of doing in your life? In what way was it presenting as a barrier for whatever purposes? And then three, what kind of techniques have you found to be effective for working through imposter syndrome?
I would say that the way that it was showing up, because again, it's one of those things. It's obviously we are very fortunate I mean, this is history in the making, right? As far as this mental health wave and people are jumping on a surfboard to ride it out and like, okay, hey, let's undo a lot of these generational curses that we've been dealing with within family and everything else. And so to now arrive to a place in the last 5 years, I want to say, maybe even less, where it's, people are focusing on that. So to have the language now to be able to be like, oh, that's what that was. Yeah. And I remember when that happened, I was at my vanity and, I have my morning rituals of sorts and I'm listening to Dr. Thema and the episode was on imposter syndrome. And the way that shook me to my core to, again, arrive to a place where I was like, oh, that's what that's called. This is what's been ailing me. But so I say all that to say that I guess the way that it was showing up the most was being in certain spaces and based on facts, right? I know that I belong there.
Yeah.
Like I did X, Y, and Z for so long. I've proven myself here. And then I was hired to do this and now I'm here. And so of course, naturally I belong, but to be in a place where I wasn't able to connect and then show up, right? And so the way that it would impact a lot of what I was doing at that time was, being, and I won't even say humble because it wasn't even that. It was just being hesitant to make those hard decisions, hesitating to stand in my power in moments where I had the authority to make things happen, but still feeling like I had to ask for permission and then looking totally sheepish and like I wasn't that bitch when I was, and I am.
And you are.
And so I don't like, not to be crass or whatever, but it's one of those things. And so that's how it was impacting me. It ended up like I did not realize it, again, arriving to places and to be able to receive and understand better. This kind of thing only ever happens after lived experience and maybe repeating that same mistake over and over because it's like a cycle, right? Yeah, and then you finally, maybe by the fourth or fifth time, you're like, oh, I get it. Bet. And so now I'm going to put it into practice. And I would say nowadays, it's very different. And I always say this to a lot of my friends, I'm like, I'm not a masochist. You got to tell me once, it'll click and I can, and sometimes it's more than once in the past, especially during my 20s. But the moment that I was able to kind of like that click of like, oh, okay, that's what that is. This is why I'm doing this, that, and the other. Now let's figure out some creative, viable solutions so I can like, blow past this. Because for me, it's always been very exciting at the thought of like what my future self, like, okay, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 16-year-old Emely, meet Emely now.
Yeah.
That to me has always been one of my biggest driving forces. Like, look at her. This is you. Yeah. Like, what? And so for me, it was literally just having some really honest conversations with my therapist, but then also with myself and being able to sit with things. I remember when initially, before I even brought it to my therapist, I sat with it. I was like, why are you doing that, Emely? Like, why do you have that feeling of not belonging or not deserving or ... all of the things, right? All of this inner dialogue because we tend to be the worst bullies to our own selves, yes. Right? And then, then I brought my therapist into the conversation and then I decided, okay, well, now that I'm like, wanting to fix this and being proactive, let me have some things that I can do to kind of stop doing this because it's onwards and upwards at all times. I'm not trying to just stand still and do the same thing and then kind of like, oh, complain and like, why am I like this? No, like, what am I going to do moving forward to like get past this? Yeah. Like heal, deal, grow.
Yep.
Keep
Love
going.
It. Love it. What I mean? That's exactly the mantra.
So I would say that things that I started to kind of really put into practice is the moment that I would have these thoughts where I would doubt myself, knowing good and well that I have all of this experience, I could do this in my sleep. Like, there's no reason why I should like hesitate. Why was I hesitating? Because I was second guessing myself. Why was I second guessing myself? Because ... all the things, right? I would start to sit with it. Literally like, okay, this is my phone. This is what it does. I send memes to my husband and my close 3 friends. I can send emails. I can mark everyone's birthday on my calendar and it sends me reminders. Like, this is what my phone does. So similar to that, I would just sit with things when they would pop into my head. Like, literally sit with it. Like, okay, why are you having that thought? Let's unpack that for a moment. And I call them micro therapy sessions with my own self.
I love it.
Because I think that we are living in a world where it's go, go, go.
Yep.
Do not stop. Do not slow down. Don't rest. You're going to miss it. Like, no, that's very much a big part of like what I do now, so that I'm able to do all the other things. So when I had these thoughts, I would sit with it.
Yep.
Let's look at it. What does it do?
Yep.
What is it like? Why?
Yep.
What is it contributing for the good or for the bad?
Yep.
Is it weighing you down? Are you able to fly? Like, what's going on? And that was definitely one of them. The other thing would be to center rest. Because sometimes when we're go, 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 100 miles an hour, doing all of the things, it doesn't allow us time to kind of sit with ourselves.
Yep.
Catch our breath.
Yep.
So it was a lot of these little things that I just started to kind of incorporate within my daily practice of existing, of being a human. And I would say that the turnaround on that was, I mean, I can't give you like a time frame, but it was literally like the way that I think about it now, looking back, it's like it wasn't one day to the next. It was putting things into practice.
Yes.
And then I have now arrived to a place where I'm just like, yeah, I love it. Let's go.
And you have to tend to that place. That's the other thing that I love the way you described it. And I love where you are right now. It's amazing, right? Where you're like, I'm here.
Yeah.
But also just, there's like a million things about what you described that were so interesting. But also just thinking about how something like imposter syndrome shows up for us, where we start to have kind of doubts about whether or not I'm supposed to be here, and also whether or not other people believe that I'm supposed to be here. Like, how am I being perceived by other people? The other language that comes to my head around this is internalized depression, right? Which is where we kind of layer into this our own identities and all of the messages that are associated with our identities, whether that be that as a woman or as a person of color or as a person who identifies as gay or whatever it is, as a person who might have a physical disability, that a lot of times we hear all of these messages about our group that we start to believe, whether or not we actually want to. They start to be the messaging that is just so prevalent in our head about us. And so as we are in spaces sometimes where people are interacting with us, we know that they know those messages. We have also heard those messages and we're like, oh, well, we're starting to question, how are they perceiving us? And that space, that questioning, causes a tremendous amount of angst. That's a lot of energy that you could be spending on other things. Just 100%. The angst about, am I supposed to be here? Let alone, do other people think I'm supposed to be here? And then, how much more do I have to kind of prove myself worthy of being here? And that effort, all of that effort is exhausting. It takes a huge emotional toll.
I would say that one of the things, because you literally knocked it out of the park with, yes, a lot of the things that we decide to carry with us because we've either known it to be true or we've been reminded.
Yes.
That part. So this is where I'm operating from now, where I am now. None of my business. What you think, what you perceive, that's not literally, that can be further away from like what my business is.
Yes.
So where I nowadays I operate from a place of softness, kindness, service, but also I want to keep it all the way real. And there's certain things that even when people treat you badly, that is one of those other things where it's also none of your business. Like, that's clearly a projection of whatever you're going through, none of your business.
Yes.
Going to give you some space. It looks like you're really going through it right now. If you want to circle back, let's talk.
Yep. Absolutely love it. And like, I'm going to let you just have all of that negative, toxic energy and keep it to yourself because it's clearly not meant for me. Even if you're trying to get it mine, I'm not going to take it.
It's not mine. It's not mine to hold, you know?
Yes. That's a beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. And it's so important for you to share that also because so many times, you know, even like the way you said you were listening to a podcast, you're listening to Dr. Thema and you had language that just really hit you at that moment in time. It's kind of like this conversation that you're sharing where all of a sudden you're like, not my business is probably going to all of a sudden hit somebody and say,
I hope so.
You know what? That's not my business. Yeah.
I hope so. I think that, gosh, if I could go back and tell 20-something-year-old Emely, like, look, you're doing a whole lot of not minding your business right now, and you're very centered around that, and it's not going to do anything for you, and it may even delay you from arriving to all of the things that you're meant for. Holy moly, I would have, oh man. She probably would have been too stubborn. She would have been in her 20s, like she's being a mess. She's being messy right now, so she probably wouldn't have been in a place to receive, but I do hope, my hopes is always like, I don't ever want to be preachy. I don't want to, none of that. I'm literally like, look, this is what I went through.
Yeah.
And if you have arrived to a place where you're ready to receive whatever that is, love that for you.
I do too. And I also love that you kind of, you know, talked about this has been your journey. Like you've been intentionally pursuing, right? Your own microtherapies or sometimes more significant therapy with other people that you've been in a very reflective path that includes practice. And it's also important to acknowledge that, right? That this is work over time for a lot of people. And that messy state that you were describing in your 20s is the case for a lot of us. And I mean, I also wish that I could have, you know, fast tracked certain things or kind of actually put into practice certain things sooner or stayed with certain practices sooner. But at some point, I'm like, I can't really regret it. I probably have to just call it all a really interesting tapestry that is my life. I have to own it.
That part.
And then I also have to remember that those practices that I'm now recommitting to, I can't let them go again because they're really important. And even the practices that you're describing, it was so important.
Not to mention, I feel like what is a well-lived life where you are able to reflect and be like, wow, like, look at how far I've come. If it isn't due to this incredible like point of reference that you've created during your messy 20s.
Yes.
Like 100% I agree with you. I think that it's important to be able to have that kind of base of like, these are all of my lived experiences. I know that in order for me to operate in a way that makes sense for me and my projects and the people that are involved in my life, it has to be from a mindful place. I have to get a certain amount of hours of sleep. I have to stay hydrated.
Yes.
I need to mind my business and not like tap into all these other things that people may be projecting or whatever else because, you know, I'm here now. I'm here now.
And absolutely. I love that when you describe that kind of point of reference because so many times people, especially people who are high achieving, and driven people are often kind of comparing ourselves against the thing that we haven't yet done. And so our attention is forward, which is a great place to say, this is my aspiration. Here are some of my goals. That's a fantastic place from which to set goals. But it's also important, as you've just described, to pause and look back. Because from that place, it's not that we're looking back with regret or remorse or stuck in the past, that we can actually measure the distance of progress. And then we can create a feedback loop that's so powerful to be like, you know what? That's a badass move I just did. You know, like it took me 10 years, but look how much I've accomplished. Or in the last 2 years, look how far I've come. And I'm going to use that same momentum, that little feedback loop that I've just given myself as kind of the fuel that's going to help me go forward. And by the way, feedback loops are great in big chunks, like looking back over 10 years or whatever. But those microtherapy sessions where you're actually building in small feedback loops are brilliant. That's fantastic. I love it. To keep that, you know, affirmative information flowing to our brains and informing how we make decisions.
I think like anything, we just have to sometimes remind ourselves of some stuff. Like,
Yeah.
You know, because again, you wake up in the morning, you have all these pending responsibilities and all the laundry list of things you need to do, never ending, I'm sure. And I think it's very easy to kind of get lost in all of it sometimes. Yeah. So these micro reminders or micro therapy sessions, that's the why in all of it is like, okay, I need to remember sometimes because I'd be forgetting.
How bad I am. I forget. Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, I'm going to shift gears for just a minute and ask you a question about a challenging or exciting experience that you had. So I know that you have, been, leading in this community space for a while. One of the things that's happening is technology, AI, there's all these new kind of things that are changing the way in which relationships happen.
Yeah.
How are some of those impacting your work and your industry? So you have physical space that you manage, people who are actually coming to physical space. Yeah. But there's also all of these new technological and AI advances that are happening everywhere. How are all those intersecting with your work?
That's a great question. Before I answer that, I want to say that and I'm sure we've all heard it at one point or another where, this is a new thing. It's new. And sometimes new can be scary. Yeah. Especially if we don't have enough information or take a moment to like pause and like, why is this scaring me, right? So I remember reading an article not too long ago where it was reflecting on how, when the light bulb came out, electricity, elevators, flying plane, like all these things were like, I remember with electricity, they thought it was like black magic or something, right? So what I say to kind of meet, when I hear that fear, I meet it with, well, maybe it would be helpful to like read a little bit more about it so that we can get a better understanding so that we can see what it really is. Because anything that is new and introduced and like, this is what it is now, all this misinformation starts to fly. Stay off of Facebook. Like, talk to a professional, talk to an expert, like let's do that, right? I would say to answer your question, at the end of the day, whether AI progresses or stands still or decides to stand still, I think that, emotional intelligence, human connection, these are all things that will continue to always be super important with business. Yeah. You can streamline things a little bit better now. Maybe you can kind of take some things off of your plate. Like, I love that part of it. But I also think that when people tend to lean into the fear bit of it or the fear mongering, right, they kind of lose sight of like, well, human connection, like this is what's going to continue to make the world go round until after we pass. Like, this is just what it is, right? So I think that as far as like where I'm standing now, I operate this 21,500 square feet of space, right? We're a venue provider. We host everything from brand activations to press junkets. And then on the production side, music videos, film, cover shoots for Harper's Bazaar. We do a lot. And then there's a co-working side of the business. And that's like the beating heart of it all, right? Yeah. We have all these memberships and a big part of me being successful at my job, as I have been, is being at capacity, having every private office filled, having engagement through the roof where people are coming to the events and they're connecting. And next thing you know, they're on the social media. New people are introduced to the picture and these introductions are being made. So my biggest thing is like, we're about to launch a collab that I've basically connected with a good friend of mine, Jessica Campbell, shout out. She is a creator of Creative Currents. Creative Currents is an event program that she designed, started over at Soho, where it's basically for creatives and basically having a better understanding of AI and how you can make it work for you.
Oh, nice.
So whether you are a screenwriter, you're a digital artist, you are in graphic design, whatever that looks like within your creative space, how can you make it work for you?
Love it.
A tool, a helpful tool. Our first ampersand event with Creative Currents will be on the 3rd of August. We're really excited about that.
Nice.
So that's my whole take on AI and technology. I think that just like anything, I mean, gosh, escalators. Wow, that probably was like a scary thing when they first made it into the scene, and now it's like,
yeah, we need escalators.
We need them.
It's so interesting to think about that because,
pardon,
even you're right. The more technological kind of advances that happen, the need for and the desire for, the thirst for human connection is just consistently growing. And I think, post-COVID, the restaurants at capacity, co-working spaces at capacity, people just constantly kind of wanting to be at events and functions and together and gatherings. Just the desire and also the appreciation for physical proximity.
Yeah.
So to be able to kind of live in a world where both of those things are kind of deeply held values and are not competing with each other,
right.
but how they're kind of being kind of used to integrate and to leverage the relationships or create new spaces
right.
and new ways of connecting as far as community is pretty exciting. It's interesting to me to also watch the, evolution. I feel like things are going so much faster than evolution. Like it's going so fast that to be able to even imagine in the next 5 years or 10 years what we could potentially see as an outgrowth of some of the things that are happening right now is also really exciting. So to be kind of in the beating heart of it all right now is a very exciting place.
I think that, yes, 100%. I think that while it has probably been a little bit emotionally taxing for a lot of us to continue to bear witness to historical events, it's in regards to technology and a lot of these advancements that are being made, and even just with being in Miami, who Miami was, who she was, back in, I want to say 2017 to who she is now, like things are changing, and I'm excited about it, and I definitely think that it's definitely an exciting time to be alive right now. A lot of things are changing. They're getting better. Some are kind of falling behind a bit. Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
It's 100%.
Well, let's make it happen. I mean, that's part of the opportunity with culture, right? Culture is going to change. It is changing. But us, unlike a lot of, movements that are underway right now where we're saying we're going to try to get things back to the good old days or try to kind of not allow this or not allow that is ridiculous. Culture, you can't mandate culture. You can't say you're not allowed legally for culture to transform. It is transforming. Yeah. We are here. We are changing. We are showing up in different ways. And so to kind of watch the tension between what I would describe as kind of the cultural transformation and then all of the other structures within that and the tension and the pull between is fascinating. And part of our opportunity is to say, those of us who are really excited about and bringing a lot of this mindful energy and practices into being, saying, how is it that we collectively, like what you're describing with Jennifer, how are we collectively going to work towards the thing that is our own aspiration, right? And create the space that we aspire to be in. So it's tension filled, but I'd also rather be in the thick of it than on the sidelines.
Absolutely.
Or not here to be part of the transformation.
I remember when I first came to Miami, I came from a place of kind of, being very connected to my community, and as much as moving around as I was doing and wanting to explore, that's something that has never left me. And so when I came to Miami in 2008, one of the first things that I found very striking, and before I say it, understand, obviously with whatever city you come from or have been to, they're operating within their own very own subculture, right?
Yeah.
LA folks, New York City, London, everywhere else, they all operate with a certain kind of something, right?
Yeah.
One of the first things I noticed coming to Miami was that people would definitely operate with a scarcity mindset. That I have this project that can very well be the next biggest thing. And I have the contact that can elevate that. But I'm not going to make the introduction to that contact because God forbid if that takes away from the plate that I'm eating. That's one of the first things I noticed here. And it felt very alien to me because I'm like, it's about community. We have to help each other and whatever else. And of course, that was met with, oh, don't be so naive. And I'm like, okay, bet. So if we want change to happen, it really does have to start with us.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's easy to get discouraged because it's like, what am I going to do? I'm like a speck in the grander scheme of things. But, over time, what I noticed was if I continued to operate in this way, even if someone were to feel it, someone that would be a newcomer to Miami, they've already had that kind of experience with how people operate, and then they meet me, then that's going to change maybe their way of seeing things. Yeah. And so with all the co-working spaces that I've operated for, I still, till this day, I have clients that have followed me from one space to the other, because they know how I operate. They know that I believe in community and how important it is to be connected and all that. And so...
Love it.
Yeah.
You didn't say this explicitly, but what I took from what you said is that community also means abundance.
100%.
Right? So that this scarcity mentality is kind of antithetical to the idea of community. And which is, maybe that's not what you meant, but it definitely is what I took. Like there's enough. There's enough.
That's exactly what I meant.
There's enough. And not only that, but if our energy together is in this place of abundance, we actually potentially could magnify exponentially the amount of opportunity, the amount of goodwill, the amount of projects or resources that we have access to. But I do think that there's oftentimes, I think it's Miami, but I think a lot of places have these, very scarcity-driven communities or spaces that people live in. And so to be able to intentionally say, this is part of the philosophy that we espouse here and that you can expect to live here, it plants a seed. Like we want other people who are also coming from that place of abundance, and also we are going to behave in that way. And it starts to normalize abundance-based behaviors and expectations in ways that also then creates a really beautiful culture, which of course people are going to take with them to other parts of their 100%. Lives. Right?
Leading by example, that's what it's about. Yeah. Similar to like leadership, when people see, that you're operating from a place of kindness and wanting to assist and be of service. I can only imagine that after they've had X amount of bad experiences with managers, how they're going to move after they had that one really good experience is going to look very different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the same applies, just leading by example, like be the change that you want to see. You know what I mean? Like very elementary stuff. But I think that in the grander scheme of things, a lot of people perhaps aren't able to kind of wrap their heads around how that looks like in real time. And I think this is what it looks like.
It looks like that. It looks like doing your own work, like as you described, right? Yeah. And creating those kind of big and small practices that remind you who you are and affirm who you are and what you've done. It's practicing kind of the things that are aligned with your philosophy, like you described, service leadership, servant leadership, and coming from a space of abundance. But all of those things are incredibly important practices, and they're all very practical. A lot of times we're kind of waiting for something else or for someone else to make things what we want them to be without realizing our own agency. So it's pretty amazing to listen to how that has manifested itself. Your agency has manifested itself in your life and also in your leadership within your organization, but also with your clients and your career. Okay, I am going to take us to a little fun part of our show. Okay, so we have some fun pictures. So this is the part that we call kind of rapid fire, and we selected 3 different photos, which we will share on the screen, but I am going to show them to you first. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to explain this photo. And I have 3 of them, so it's a rapid fire. I know.
All
right. So we're going to start off with this one.
Holy moly. Okay. So shout out to Siobhan White, Victoria Worship, Rachel Richardson, and my shaman Nore. Okay. So Bet, this photo, okay. So this is like at the height of quarantine. Like we were in the trenches, emotionally, mentally. Hold on. I'm painting you a picture. I'm a storyteller. This is how it went down. Everyone that I was connected to at that time was really going through it. Yeah. In that picture, it's a bunch of Black and brown women.
Yeah.
This is us, right? And around this time, a lot of white folks found out that like racism is still on and popping, and it's still impacting a lot of our community. And so during that time, we kept getting calls. Collectively, we were getting a lot of calls from a lot of people and like, oh my God, I'm so sad. And it was like, it got to a point where matching everything else that was happening in the world, we were spent.
Yep.
So at this time, I connected with my shaman and I told her, I'm like, look, I want to do something that can amplify love and kindness and all of the things. And we just need this moment, right? And so she was like, okay, let's go. So we ended up all meeting up at Morningside Park. Now pause. It was COVID era, like quarantine really. So I made sure that everyone got COVID tested, and I was very strict. I was very strict about that. I wore the mask until people were like not wearing masks because the state said we will penalize you. You know, like I was by the book. Everyone got tested. We were all in the clear, and I'm like, okay, this is the idea. We're all gonna meet. I need you guys to come with an open mind, and this is what we're gonna do, right? And it ended up being like this, you know, micro psychedelic experience of sorts. The name of the plant medicine is called Changa, and it probably lasts no more than 15, 20 minutes. But it takes you to this whole nother part of existence, and it amplifies. And as we talk about it, I got goosebumps. I love it. Because you never forget these kinds of things. But we all individually got to experience that. And then at the end, it was like a very natural reaction to want to hold each other. Yes. So that picture was like post everyone doing it. And we were just on another level of like euphoric existence, like just feeling very grateful. And I think that we needed that. I really do believe in being able to get back to the source. And that may mean a lot to a whole lot of different people. But for me, it means, you know, getting back to the source is, okay, I'm here, I'm alive, but it's not just me, it's we.
Yes, yes.
Right? Yes. And so let's celebrate that. Yeah. The sky is blue, the grass is green. Let's celebrate that. Like, what a time to be alive. Sure, a lot of things are going wrong, but also a lot of things are going right. And we have each other and we're not alone. And it's about community.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful. I would have never been able to read all that, but the joy that's showing through on your faces, and also given all the context, right? The timing, all those calls. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's beautiful. Okay. All right. Yeah. I love it. I love the emotion that it brings. Okay. How about this one?
So this is my son. This is my son, Miles Davis. So I got my first dog in 2018, like the very tail end. And I think I must have been like going on 32. So I was like, I made a decision very early on that I didn't want to have kids. I felt like kids are a big responsibility, and I wanted to dedicate my life unlearning and remothering myself, right? However, biology, right? And so I started to feel like, God, like I want to raise something and nurture it and it's going to be good to the world. And so I looked at my husband and I was like, we need to get a dog. And he sat me down and he's like, dogs are a big responsibility. He traveled a lot. He's like, I'm out of town a lot. And so it's going to be your responsibility. I'm like, I'm grown. I know. I've done the research. Let's go. So he's like, okay, cool. Do it. So then it was kind of funny how when I would tell the story to a lot of friends that have wanted to have kids and they kind of went through some fertility issues, that they're like, this story is way too close to home for me. And but they understand. So I wanted to adopt. I wanted, I felt like that was like the right thing to do. Right. So for a matter of 6 months, I literally went to every shelter from Homestead all the way to Port St. Lucie. That experience, it broke me a little bit. So I would show up early, I would go, and the only time I would be able to go was on a Saturday, right? So a lot of my Saturdays were shot. I would travel to these places, I would, be in the parking lot, but almost every time it was a scene from one of those Black Friday Walmart situations from back in the day where people they would rush in and by the time I would find a prospective dog that I thought this could be great, I was told, oh, by the way, it has cancer, or, and then, and it was this on a loop for about 6 months. And I was like, this is really tough. And so finally one day I thought, I need to take a break. This is like really a lot. And so I decided to kind of take a beat. And then randomly I went on Craigslist like a week later, and I literally Googled black dog because I knew that I wanted a black dog. And I found a picture of this black dog. And I think what intrigued me the most, and I've already established this, I have a very adventurous spirit. The amount of money that they were offering to like buy the dog was so specific. It was too specific.
It was like 0.99 kind of.
It was literally, the guy was like $757. And I'm like, that is very specific. So then I was curious. I'm like, bet. I hit up the guy. It must have been like 5 a.m. on a Saturday. But I was like, I was ready, right? And the guy immediately like texts me back like 5 minutes later, and he's like, okay, let's meet in Kendall. I'm like, okay, let's go. So I show up, I have my friend with me, and at that time, I had never been to Kendall before. I've been living in Miami since 2008, and that was my first time in 2018.
Wow.
So I'm in Kendall, and I'm in, the guy has me meet up with him in some like miscellaneous apartment complex in the parking lot. And I'm like, my friend, her dad's a hunter, so she has the bear mace. We're like ready just in case, because you never know. We're we're women, like, come on,
Smart move.
And so the guy, like, he pulls up next to me and he calls me and he's like, do you have the money? And I'm like, I literally like look at the phone, look at him, I'm like, do you have the dog? Like, what?
Oh, this is out of a movie.
So then he gets out of the car, and like I immediately like, I exit the car, and then he kind of, I hear a yelp, and my body froze because I knew that meant that he wasn't very like gentle with picking up the dog. And so I immediately like, I didn't throw the money at him, but I was like, I put it against his chest. I'm like, take it. I grabbed the dog and I went on my way.
Oh, but you didn't even like spend time deciding?
No,
you didn't even meet? Nothing.
Like it was, I knew then that I needed to like, yeah.
Oh,
and now,
goodness.
So Miles Davis, that's, I trained him. I saw every podcast you could imagine. There's a lot of TED Talks on dog training. I saw every, no, you don't understand. Because my biggest thing is, we cannot say one person in this room, we have always heard that one person that has a dog and they behave badly. And essentially it's a reflection of you. And then they're like, oh, she never does this or he never does this.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they do. They do it all the time.
Naughty dog, they're not. Yes. Well, training is a big deal. Yeah.
So I decided this is my legacy. This is my dog. Like he's going to be a reflection of our household. So one of the first things I did, I sat him down at home and I'm like, listen, your name is Miles Davis now. You're a black dog. You are not going to be able to afford to be acting a fool in these streets like a lot of these other dogs. But after we had that initial chat, what I kind of learned, what training a dog taught me was they are a reflection of you. And if you want them to behave a certain way, you have to just be on it and, being repetitive with the training so that you're able to bring them out in the world and they're able to operate in the same level that you do in a way, obviously. Like, so with Miles, I take him to the office every day.
Oh, I know. I've met Miles.
You met Miles.
He's very well-mannered.
He's a good man.
I love that you gave Miles, the black dog, the talk.
The
talk. Like, look, you probably watched it. He's like watching like James Baldwin documentaries.
Oh, yes.
This is who we are.
Yes, absolutely. The one on Amazon. It's really good. It's really good.
I love it. The last question. I have to ask you this. This is one of the rapid fire questions. I have two more. I'm going to ask you one specific about photography. And then the other I'm going to ask you is the last question. Okay. So you have a passion for photography. Do you think that played a role in understanding of people and building relationships?
In a way, yeah. I would say in a way. I would say unless you're a professional model, I think that people tend to be very uncomfortable in front of a camera. And I'm going to go ahead and connect that with a lot of people also have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
In the world, just being outside of the house can be a very anxious, riddled thing. So I would say that my connection with photography in real life and I've been told that I can be very disarming. So whether it's behind the camera or just having a conversation with someone that would normally be a bit, anxious in that situation, meeting someone new, I can be very disarming in either space. I mean, I've had people tell me where Dr. Leslie Bauman, shout out, she's my dermatologist, and she has hated every photo of herself that has been taken. And back in 2016, her and I decided to make a trade where, she would give me, services for me being on retainer, basically. And she really liked how the pictures that I've taken of her over the years.
Love it.
And a big part of that has to do with, because I'm so disarming, it's feeling comfortable,
yes.
right?
Yep.
So whether I'm taking, her headshot or we're sitting down for some coffee, it's like people open up and if they feel comfortable. And I think a lot of the time it's being able to kind of remove ego from these kinds of instances where, and this could also be applied to like relationship building. I think one of the biggest things that people kind of, it's a mistake. It's straight up a mistake where they're like, what can I get out of this? So they're leading with like this opportunistic, mind state, or they think, oh, well, I have my network already. I don't no new friends. I disagree. So I think that when it comes to, connection, it's being able to remove myself and, okay, how can I be of service?
Love it. Yeah.
What kind of, positive impact am I trying to create?
Yep.
And also like, how can I help?
I love it. I love it. It's so simple. Well, you have great skin, so your dermatologist is definitely working her magic. And it's so cool that you can create the space where people feel really comfortable kind of being themselves in a way that allows you to capture that, right? Because I absolutely understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, the last question. Yes. So if you had to take a picture of one thing, right? Something that represented what you think it means to be you right now at this stage of your life, what would it be? It doesn't have to be human necessarily, but it symbolizes and reflects where you are right now.
That's an excellent question. I want to say if you were to ask that to any of my friends, they would immediately be like, it has to be something with soft girl era, because that's where I'm at and that's where I want to continue to be, right? But I would say, so my husband's originally from Finland, and our family house there's this dock. It's like on the west coast of the country, and so it's an archipelago. And what may look like, a lake or a river, it's actually the Baltic Ocean. And so like right in front of the house, there's this dock. And this dock is where I have found myself taking many naps after jet lag, because that trip to Finland, it's not rough, but it's long. And I've had a lot of really wonderful realizations on that dock. And the thing with Finland, during midsummer, the sun doesn't go down. There's a picture of that on my Instagram somewhere where it'll start to go down and it'll be like lemonade pink sunset, and then the sun will go right back up. So when I think of that dock, it's been such it's been such an interesting place for me to realize stuff, to catch my breath, to rest, to do my face mask, paint my nails, just like the safe place to just exist in a very soft way, very softly, living softly.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love it. And I love this, living softly. It's funny. I know this was about you, but it resonates with me very much. It's just the place that, just sounds absolutely beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And now I have a picture of that dock in my head.
We got to go.
With you sitting on it, resting. I can imagine myself in that picture now. I'll happily, yes, we'll take Miles Davis on a trip.
Period. Well, yeah. So, yeah. No, yes.
Miles Davis goes. Definitely.
Let's go.
I would absolutely love to.
The dog knows how to sauna out there.
Oh my goodness.
You don't, girl.
Miles Davis has a good life. I need to talk to Miles Davis about, my poor dog does not have the life Miles Davis has. We're going to talk and I'm going to try to get my game up.
Oh, man.
It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for the conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about you, and I've had so many realizations. There's so many points that are just bullet points, things that I can easily, and hopefully our listeners can kind of easily take away that can, strike a chord with them, maybe things that they can put into their own daily practice, or ideas that they can bring to their work and their role as kind of leaders and managers and people who are trying to create more positive space and community. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.